October 27th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with the war over in the Middle East. Israel says Hamas used North Korean and Iranian weapons in attacks on October 7th, while Iran says it's ready to play a mediating role in releasing Israeli hostages from Hamas under the condition that Israel frees 6,000 Palestinians held in its prisons. Over in Washington, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and China's top diplomat Wang Yi acknowledged that the two countries have differences but share important common interests ahead of a potential face-to-face between U.S. President Joe Biden and Wang Yi. South Korea will begin gradually increasing the medical school enrollment quota in 2025 to tackle growing concerns over the shortage of doctors, especially in provincial areas, and to better prepare for Korea as it becomes a super-aged society. Israel says Hamas used weapons made by North Korea and Iran during its October 7th attack. Meanwhile, Tehran expressed willingness to get involved with hostage negotiations, but stressed that Palestinian prisoners in Israel should be released in exchange. Lee Seung-jae reports.
The Israeli military says North Korean and Iranian weapons were used by Hamas during its attack on Israel on October 7th. Authorities on Thursday put weapons they say were used by Hamas during the attack, which included mines, rocket-propelled grenades, and drones. An Iranian mortar launcher and a North Korean-made grenade launcher were part of the haul of weapons recovered, with an official saying a total of 20% of all weapons used by Hamas during the attacks were from North Korea and Iran. Iran's foreign minister told the United Nations on Thursday that Tehran is ready to play a role in mediating talks to release Israeli hostages from Hamas, along with Qatar and Turkey. However, he said in order for such negotiations to take place, Israel must be prepared to release 6,000 Palestinians held in its prisons. Meanwhile, according to Russian media outlet TASS, a delegation from Hamas visited Moscow on Thursday for talks on the release of hostages, including Russian citizens that the militant group is currently holding in Gaza. The Kremlin said Iran's deputy foreign minister is in Moscow to hold talks with Russian officials to discuss the ongoing conflict and find ways to stabilize the situation. Israel slammed the visit by the Hamas delegation, saying that Russia should expel them from their country, while criticizing Russia for inviting them. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and China's top diplomat Wang Yi met in Washington on Thursday. According to CNN, Blinken welcomed Wang, saying he looks forward to constructive conversations over the next few days. Wang noted that the two countries have disagreements, but they share important common interests and challenges. While there was no mention of war between Israel and Hamas prior to the meeting, Blinken told the UN Security Council he would speak to Wang about cooperation on preventing the Israel-Hamas war from spilling over into a regional conflict. Wang will also meet with National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and speak with President Joe Biden, possibly to discuss a potential meeting between Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping at the APEC conference next month. The U.S. and China have recently held meetings between high-ranking officials to ease bilateral tensions. U.S. economic growth accelerated to nearly 5% in the third quarter. Now, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen expressed confidence in the economy's strength, countering concerns about rising deficits and an economic recession. Shin Se-byuk reports.
The U.S. economy grew 4.9% in the third quarter. The figure released by the Commerce Department on Thursday marked the highest increase in nearly 2 years since the 7% growth recorded in the fourth quarter of 2021. Notably, this surpassed both the previous quarter's 2.1% and economists' expectations of 4.3%, despite the country's interest rates reaching their highest level in 22 years. Consumer spending played a key role. It was up 4%, the fastest pace since the last quarter of 2021, demonstrating the country's resilience in the face of challenges such as high inflation and soaring interest rates. Other indicators, inventories, investment, and government spending also posted strong growth. In a TV interview on Thursday, U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen acknowledged that while the growth rate is likely to slow, she labeled it as a good, strong number. Yellen also expressed confidence in the U.S. economy's ability to achieve a soft landing. Meanwhile, as for the significant increase in long-term bond yields, Yellen attributed this to confidence in the U.S. economy, which has led to expectations of higher interest rates for a longer period. The interest rate on the 10-year U.S. Treasury bond hit 5% early this week, the highest since 2007. This came as the U.S. last week reported a $1.7 trillion federal budget deficit for the fiscal year 2023. The 10-year Treasury yield, a barometer of investor confidence, is widely considered one of the safest investments as it carries the full backing of the U.S. government. There have been suggestions that higher bond yields came as a result of worries about rising U.S. deficits and an economic recession. Despite concerns, Yellen dismissed suggestions of rising U.S. deficits and a potential economic recession and emphasized the possibility of longer-term yields decreasing. 신세벽, Arirang News.
It's been almost 3 weeks since the Hamas attack on Israel sparked concern over rising economic uncertainty, especially in terms of volatility in energy prices and rising inflationary pressure. What scenarios could drive the economic impact of the conflict in the Middle East? Our Shin-Ayong explains.
Since the beginning of the Israel-Hamas conflict, all eyes have been on global oil prices, which can push up inflation both at home and abroad. Global oil prices jumped more than 4% on the third day of the Israel-Hamas conflict, which was the biggest one-day gain since April 3rd. However, even though oil prices rebounded as of Wednesday after prices fell on Tuesday for the third straight session, fluctuations have been less significant for the past few days. This came amid diplomatic efforts from a number of countries to release hostages. Also, Israel has not yet launched a ground invasion due to international pressure, alleviating concerns about disruptions in oil supply. But it's too early to predict the actual economic impact, as it's uncertain how the conflict will unfold. Bloomberg Economics estimates that if the conflict extends to a war between Israel and Iran, it could push oil prices to $150 a barrel and drop global growth to 1.7%. This is because of Iran's proximity to the Strait of Hormuz, a vital oil trading route.
If Iran disrupts oil tankers passing through the Strait of Hormuz or even blocks the strait, it could significantly impact global oil prices. This is because about 30% of the volume of the world's total oil consumption passes through that route.
Meanwhile, unlike the Ukraine war, in the case of the Israel-Palestine conflict, the region's contribution to global raw material production is not substantial. According to a report from the Korea International Trade Association, Israel and Palestine each account for less than 0.4% of South Korea's overall trade, meaning the effect is expected to be insignificant. However, the author of the report said it's necessary to diversify the supply chain of certain items.
South Korea heavily depends on Israel for key items including bromine and airborne radar for aircraft. With an import dependency exceeding 90% for these items, a prolonged Israel-Hamas conflict could pose challenges for South Korea. Therefore, it is crucial to diversify the supply chain to secure alternative suppliers.
He added that a prolonged war could potentially disrupt the supply chains in these advanced industries, as Israel is a hub for this sector, where there are R&D centers and sales offices of South Korean firms like Samsung and SK Hynix. Shin-Ayong, Arirang News.
It's almost been a year since South Korea's Itaewon tragedy, which resulted in a huge decrease in foot traffic and put a significant burden on local businesses. Have things returned to what they used to be? Let's turn to Professor Bae So-young this morning. Welcome to the program.
Good morning.
Professor, it's been a year, like I said, since the tragic incident took place in Central Seoul. Now, what has the past year been like, especially for business in that area?
Well, it's been an extremely challenging year for all the businesses in Itaewon for the past year. So there's been a significant drop in customers and tourists in the areas, resulting in reduced revenue for local businesses. So some shops had to temporarily shut down, and also others have also faced financial hardships due to the decreased food traffic. So especially such challenges severely impacted like local bars and pubs. So while there used to be lots of Korean customers before, but now there are much more foreigners compared to Korean citizens. So it seems like Korean people still feel hesitant to visit those Itaewon area due to their emotional reluctance.
Right, it was definitely a hub for both locals and foreigners. Then what's it like now? Because I remember the area, even the surrounding area, being completely emptied out. How are things now then?
Yeah, so after the incident, the entire area was literally emptied out for a while. But since then, the government and businesses and some artist groups, sometimes non-government organizations, and some of the citizens have been really working so hard to recreate some energy and vibrance in the Itaewon and gain its reputation back. So in a wish to attract more people to revisit this area, many cultural events, performances, or exhibitions were organized as well. So now, especially during the weekend season, so it seems like many people get together in this Itaewon area again, just like before. And there are even long lines in front of the popular restaurants. But the thing is, during the weekdays, the number of visitors is quite limited. So it's still at about 60% compared to the previous year. And the general atmosphere is not quite the same as before. Some business owners, they feel really hopeless and say that this seems to be actually their new normal, which they really need to get used to. So many shops still rely on substantial amount of loans to survive throughout this challenging period of recovery.
Sure, the liveliness in the area is not as lively, but slowly recovering, it sounds like. Now, such tragedies are not unique to South Korea, I have to say. Things like this have happened around the world, and communities and businesses have managed to survive and get back on their feet, right? Could you provide any examples?
Yeah, absolutely. So tragic incidents have occurred in many parts of the world society. And one of the examples was actually terrorist attack in the French city of Nice back in 2016. So after the attack, the number of visitors actually sharply dropped after the event, and all the businesses were so much devastated. But the government put all the effort to ensure the security measures and initiated culture and tourism event to rebuild their city and reposition themselves. So now Nice has become a popular tourist destination once again. And another example would be back in 2019 and 20, there was a big bushfire in Australia. It was a natural disaster. And while valuable cultural heritage and natural areas were all burnt due to this fire, so it inspired Australians to launch their own initiative, their own community-driven campaigns to encourage people to go back to those impacted area. And they got to pay even more attention to wildlife conservation and local protection again too. So depending on the nature and the scale of the accident, the recovery period may differ, but in most of the cases, impact has been eased in terms of the number of tourists or visitors within 2 to 3 years after the incident, based on the strong resilience of the whole community.
Sure, Professor, but you've mentioned how there were events organized by non-government organizations. And what is it that those businesses in Itaewon need the most to fully return to where they were before? Is it that type of activities or events? What is it?
Well, I think the two primary supports will be needed. So first, absolutely financial support. So just like when the pandemic occurred, business owners, they would feel really frustrated since the whole situation seemed to be so unsure. So to keep their businesses, they would need short-term and long-term financial support. And second of all, it is important to drive kind of a campaign to reposition this area to drive more visitors back. So it doesn't necessarily mean that this incident should be completely forgotten. So in history, like all events that have occurred become a part of the identity of that region, and also it holds significant messages. So while keeping this kind of lessons learned from this incident, the region would need to be promoted in a very creative way with the whole community.
That's great. So financial aid and also keeping the identity that the place has held. All right, Professor Bae, thank you so much for your time this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
South Korea will start to gradually increase the medical school admissions quota in 2025 in order to tackle doctor shortages in areas outside the capital, as well as in essential areas of medicine. Health Minister Cho Kyu-hong said Thursday that the government will push ahead with its planned increase, starting with schools that can physically handle more students. Now, schools that can't will follow the measure from 2026. The government aims to increase the quotas for existing medical schools while reviewing the plan to open new schools in areas outside of Seoul. The quota has been frozen at a little over 3,000 since 2006. Amid rising criticism from doctors, the government will continue talks to improve working conditions, and it will also inject some $220 million each year to increase compensation for obstetrics and pediatrics. Authorities here in South Korea are tightening the vaccination campaign for cattle with lumpy skin disease spreading through the cattle across the country. Our Ian-hee went to one of local farms to check out on-site disease prevention efforts.
Viral lumpy skin disease is spreading in South Korea with the number of farms found to have confirmed cases on the rise. The outbreak was first discovered in Chungcheongnam-do province on October 20th. And since then, more at other farms in the province, as well as in neighboring Chungcheongbuk-do province, Gyeonggi-do, Jeollabuk-do, and Gangwon-do provinces, and Incheon. This has led to the culling of over 2,000 cattle. As part of the response, authorities have announced the introduction of an additional 4 million doses of the vaccine by the end of this month, and that all cattle in the country will be vaccinated by early November. The Central Disaster Management Headquarters is currently carrying out vaccinations, focusing on farms close to where outbreaks occurred, using the 540,000 doses of pre-secured vaccine. This farm in Gyeonggi-do province is vaccinating all 104 cattle in its herd.
The vaccination of all cattle on the farm has been completed according to the government's manual, and we are keeping strict vehicle control measures to prevent the spread of the disease. Also, I'm trying my best to control parasites, since the virus is transmitted by blood-sucking insects. When feeding the animals in the morning and evening, I am spending more time observing the cattle to check for symptoms.
Local governments are actively promoting disease preventive measures, including the operation of disinfection facilities, as well as pest control measures, as lumpy skin disease is transmitted by blood-feeding insects. The mortality rate is under 10%, and symptoms include skin nodules and lower milk production. While the disease does not pose a threat to humans in any way, farm owners are concerned.
I believe that it is most important for individual farm owners to pay careful attention to prevent the disease from spreading. I am seriously concerned about the lumpy skin disease spreading to my farm and leading to a culling of all the cattle.
The Central Disaster Management Headquarters has placed restrictions on the movement of cattle on farms in regions neighboring areas where lumpy skin disease has been found until vaccination is complete. Authorities say, considering the period required for antibodies to form, the next 3 weeks are crucial. Ian-hee, Arirang News.
South Korea's men's national football team has moved up 2 spots in the latest FIFA rankings to 24th in the world. That's according to the latest FIFA ranking released on Thursday. It's South Korea's second consecutive jump after the team also jumped 2 places in July. The latest ranking comes as Taeguk Warriors beat Tunisia 4-0 and Vietnam 6-0 this month. Since Jurgen Klinsmann took over the national team in March, South Korea has had 3 wins, 3 draws, and 2 losses. And among Asian countries, Japan ranked highest in 18th position.
Good morning, I'm Seung Kim, and we now turn over to stories from around the world. Following the mass shooting in the city of Lewiston, Maine on Wednesday, which left at least 18 dead, American President Joe Biden released a statement urging lawmakers, especially Republican counterparts, to cooperate in passing bills for strengthening gun laws. While an intensive manhunt is still underway for the 40-year-old suspect Robert Card, Biden released a White House statement on Thursday emphasizing the urgent need for additional legislative action. Biden has been promoting gun safety policies through the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, as well as the establishment of the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention. The president said that this is the very least we owe every American who will now bear the scars, physical and mental, of this latest attack. Category 5 Hurricane Otis, which made landfall on Mexico's Pacific coast on Wednesday, has reportedly caused at least 27 deaths and left 4 people missing. The tourist city of Acapulco was particularly affected by the hurricane, which rapidly strengthened from a tropical storm to a powerful Category 5 hurricane in record time. The storm left Acapulco's municipal water system down and some 500,000 homes without power. Authorities have also raised concerns over a potential increase in the number of dead following extensive devastation. Mexico's President López Obrador visited Acapulco late Wednesday and said that restoring power and infrastructure was a top priority. Scientists are working towards an explanation as to why the hurricane was not foreseen. Moving over to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, now where the two of the world's best in heavyweight boxing and mixed martial arts, Tyson Fury and Francis Ngannou, are set to face off under boxing rules on Saturday night. Tyson Fury, nicknamed the Gypsy King, is a 35-year-old WBC heavyweight champion born in Manchester, UK. His opponent, Francis the Predator Ngannou, a 37-year-old former UFC heavyweight champion, has come a long way from working in a sand quarry in Cameroon as a 12-year-old to becoming one of the most renowned figures in mixed martial arts. In what's being called a dream matchup between boxing and UFC, the fighters are expected to touch gloves after a series of undercut bouts beginning 8 p.m. local time. More than 50 years after the British rock band from Liverpool, the Beatles, broke up, the band announced the release of what's being called their last song, titled Now and Then. Among the most iconic pop stars in the history of music, the Fab Four debuted in 1960 and released timeless global hits such as Hey Jude, Come Together and Let It Be before the band broke up in 1970. Comprised of John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison and Ringo Starr, the band's only 2 surviving members, 81-year-old McCartney and 83-year-old Starr, worked with director Peter Jackson, who used AI to complete the recording. Now and Then will be released on Thursday, November 2nd.
Good morning. The skies look like it's going to rain soon in the capital, but I hope you didn't take your umbrella. The skies will get sunnier, but those in the east of Gangwon-do province are in for a drenching. Keep an umbrella handy through this afternoon. Expect to see up to 60 millimeters for those in the east of Gangwon-do. The rest of the country could see 5 to 40 millimeters along with thunder and lightning during the day today. Unlike what was expected, temperatures are much warmer than normal this morning in most places. And afternoon highs will be a couple of notches lower than yesterday, but still higher than seasonal temperatures this afternoon. Seoul and Gwangju will see highs of 19 degrees, Busan at 22 degrees Celsius this afternoon. Air quality has improved in central regions, but Gyeongsang-do provinces and surrounding areas are slightly higher than usual. Looking ahead to the weekend, ample sunshine is forecasted, painting a perfect backdrop for autumn outings. But make sure to layer up and be prepared for fluctuating conditions. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. We'll be back next week for a Monday's edition at the same time, 9 a.m. Korea time.
한국에 오면 먹어야죠. 먹어도 끝이 없는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 웰컴. (24시간) 불이 꺼지지 않는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 웰컴. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
Hi, my name is Tamara Mawini. I am Canada's ambassador to the Republic of Korea. I know that Arirang TV and Arirang Media has been very active in sharing around the world the wonders and achievements in Korea, and I really look forward to all their future endeavors and how they will help promote strong media, freedom of expression, journalism, and culture into the future. And Canada's excited to be part of that. Really welcomed Arirang's engagement in our own 60th anniversary of diplomatic relations this year between Canada and Korea, and we look forward to continuing the partnership. Thank you. 감사합니다. Resonating with the world, Arirang.
백만 상사의 대표다.
강원도 홍보요?
100만 뷰를 찍어주겠다. 강원특별자치도 특징이나 아름다움을 전할 수 있는 방법.
꼭 ABC가 해야 멋있죠.
우리 홍보 지역은 통일.
속초 안 가본 사람 있어도 한 번만 가본 사람이 없다.
서핑하면 양양이고 양양하면 서핑. 원주. 갈 곳이 너무 많아. 평창입니다.
개회식이 정말 최고였죠.
횡성입니다.
횡성에는 8대 명품이 있는데요. 한, 더, 안, 어, 토, 절, 잡.
웰컴. (24시간) 불이 꺼지지 않는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 웰컴. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
We're here to make a new type of news. New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's October 27th here in Seoul. I'm Shin-Yoon, and you're watching News Generation, where we discuss the latest issues concerning our generation. Joining me in the studio is Niall Song. Good morning. And Walter Lee.
Lovely to be here.
Now, both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s and share their own insights. As usual, let's start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. Asia's second richest person, Hui Kaiyan, has lost 98% of his wealth. Hui started one of China's biggest and now most indebted real estate companies, Evergrande. But in 2021, the company was officially labeled a defaulter, with Hui failing to repay $327 billion in liabilities. And moving on to our next story. The United States is also considering whether to designate November 22nd as Kimchi Day. Since 2020, Korea has set aside this date as a legal anniversary to commemorate the nutritional value and tradition behind our soul food kimchi. Some states like California, Virginia, and New York have already declared their own kimchi days in the past. But for the first time ever, the U.S. House Oversight Committee is planning to adopt a resolution which would make Kimchi Day recognized on a federal level. And last but not least, recently we've seen many Korean celebrities make headlines over illegal drug use. The latest star to join this list includes K-pop idol G-Dragon. Police have booked the leader of boy band Big Bang, who was found to have illegally smoked marijuana back in 2011, but at the time he hadn't been formally prosecuted. Now we're still waiting for the police to give more details on the case, but netizens have compiled videos of G-Dragon's latest interview clips and compared them to actor Yoo In, who was also indicted for habitually using illegal drugs, and many compared their behavior patterns, pointing to how both looked very anxious and couldn't keep still. So here in the studio, what do you guys think about this news story and how we're seeing celebrities constantly hit headlines over illegal drug use?
Well, if I have to be 100% honest, I'm not really surprised about this type of behavior. This is not just in Korea, this happens everywhere, and we see it on a global scale. And to be honest with you, when they are that famous, they live the lavish lifestyle that they lead, they mix with those groups who do the same thing. And therefore, I guess it could be very tempting. A lot of people use drugs as a way to alleviate through the stress that they're going through. And for example, being an entertainer, being an entrepreneur or whatever, takes a lot of energy out of you, and there just needs to be an output for that. And it shouldn't be drugs, of course. When you're a celebrity, you have the responsibility of being a good person, to be a good role model, but unfortunately we're seeing this too much these days in Korea. You know, compared to other countries, you know, Korea itself is supposed to be a no drug zone, right, or no drug country, but you'd be pretty naive to think that there wouldn't be in here in Korea, just because of the way the world works at the moment. And yes, we don't want them here, but there's nothing we can do at the moment.
I think we need better regulations, because Korea was once known as the no-drug zone, but as you mentioned, we're seeing so many societal cases involving even teens using drugs, and I don't think it's better that we're seeing public figures like G-Dragon, who are very influential, especially among our generation, to be taking on that path. Now, what did you think about this news story?
I feel like I've mentioned multiple times that I am a fan of G-Dragon.
Exactly.
And in 2011, I did see what was happening, and it was kind of disappointing, but I think I almost kind of lied to myself saying it's okay. But it really isn't. We can't stand to defend him if he comes out guilty once more. And I know there's different types of drugs and what kind of effects that it has on your body, like the severity is different, but it's illegal to use it as an entertainment in Korea, and I don't think there should be an exception for anybody. And I'm not saying that, you know, he should be the only person setting the example for the entire nation, but no Korean should also be taking drug abuse lightly, whether they're famous or not.
Yeah, and whether that's in Korea or abroad, smoking or doing anything related to legal narcotics is illegal if you're a Korean national, especially here in Korea. And that was our news feed for this Friday. And speaking of it being a Friday, it means it's time to introduce the hottest places to enjoy autumn here in Seoul. And today we're going to take you around the best street markets, traditional markets, and food markets here in the capital. So first off, here in the studio, Nell, why don't you tell our viewers why these markets are trending, especially among our generation?
Right. I mean, I think these marketplaces used to be kind of older people gathering, but I want to talk about Namdaemun first. Now, the reason they become really popular amongst millennials and Gen Z is because of the liquor stores. Apparently, the average age of those visiting the liquor stores in Namdaemun have dropped in the past few years due to the prices being a little cheaper than the bigger chain stores. I feel like I shouldn't even be saying this on air so that not that many people know, but yes, that's what it is. But already it's so popular that you go and you look for a specific bottle and it might not be there. And we actually even talked about whiskey and how popular it became amongst the younger generation. Rather than drinking, you know, kind of soju, they would go for a few glasses of whiskey instead. And so that's one of the reasons why it became popular in the younger generation.
I completely agree. I think in the past, many people thought that these traditional markets would be refined only to the elderly, like seniors, because they have a lot of traditional food, clothes, vintage clothes, that is. But now we're seeing a lot more youngsters, as you mentioned, Namdaemun, and you will explain that in depth a little later. But now we're seeing a lot of trending drinks, clothes, food that really resonate with our generation. Would you like to add on?
Yeah, you're both right about that. I mean, to be honest with you, a lot of the young generation now are going back to the old days where, you know, clothes, as you said, antiques, items, whatever, are becoming now back in fashion. And I think these are the only, or these places that we'll talk about are the only places where you can really get them at an affordable price and more of like a steal, if anything, because, you know, if you try and get the, let's say, a Polaroid camera, an old school Polaroid camera online, you're probably going to be paying a lot of money. So you just got to go to these little areas that sell all these little trinkets and old items, knickknacks, and I think this is great, to be honest with you. I mean, vintage always comes back. It always comes back. That's the thing about vintage. And these sort of, I was going to say restaurants, but these sort of markets, are the place to buy them. And, you know, I've walked around them and I wish I had the style to be a bit more vintage and like sip a whiskey, but it just doesn't suit me. But yeah, that's what the younger generation are into these days. I think vintage is now coming back again.
Exactly. And we've been dedicating the past Fridays to introduce some of the best places to visit during autumn time. And I think the biggest advantage of these markets is they're in an open space. So you can enjoy the autumn breeze, enjoy some good food, and see the tradition of Seoul and like our country while being in a bustling capital city. Now let's introduce all these different types of markets people can go through, starting with the most iconic and oldest ones you mentioned very briefly, Niall. So walk us through Namdaemun and Dongdaemun.
Right. So the first one that I was mentioning about the cool liquor shops that you guys can visit if you're in Korea. So Namdaemun is located in the center of Seoul, and so it's easy access. Even for tourists, it's great to visit. It attracts more than 400,000 foreign tourists in one day. That's crazy. And they're both quite large, Namdaemun and Dongdaemun. It has more than 1,700 different types of items, whether it be little trinkets, like Walter was saying, food, and different shopping materials. They're also famous for their galchijorim and kalguksu, which are delicious, especially if you visit during autumn. Imagine a really hot bowl of kalguksu. Dongdaemun, as Walter is going to talk about later on as well, it's the center of Korea's fashion events. It's where all the fashion people join in, and there's giant buildings like Milliore, Tusan Tower, and there's hundreds of little clothes shops inside them, up the entire building. And when I was in middle school and I visited Korea, just coming back, this was the place to go to buy all of the clothes that I needed for the next few years. You can shop 24 hours in these giant buildings, so many options, but they're kind of, off-brand sometimes, but really cute things. If you want accessories, shoes, clothes, this is a place to go.
And as you mentioned, the DDP, it's always a place for a lot of fashion shows to be held. We're seeing the biggest fashionistas join here, whether it depends on the season. As you're seeing on the VCR right now, I think we're seeing a lot of fashion trends up there because DDP is basically the fashion icon of Seoul.
Exactly.
And the architecture is beautiful and stuff like that.
I think, yes, for Dongdaemun as well, it's a way for people to express themselves and be a little bit out of the box when it comes to I guess the fast trends are happening at the moment that we all follow. But with Dongdaemun, a lot of people go there and they wear what I would call outlandish, but fashionable items. And I think a lot of people feel comfortable going there and showing off maybe their certain taste and flair. So if you're a person who really likes to, wear unique clothes or have a unique style, I think Dongdaemun would be a place where you'd fit straight in.
Exactly.
Right.
And I think the best part I like about Dongdaemun and Namdaemun is that they're quite close by, so you can go visit them the same day. And also, as we saw in the video first, Namdaemun, there's so many places to eat, and it's one of the most iconic markets. It's one of the oldest markets in Seoul, per se. So there's a lot of kukbap streets as well. And kukbap in English, it's like soup with rice?
Soup with rice, but there's multiple types of it. There's like the meat kind or even the 콩나물 kind, which is, kind of plant-based.
Exactly.
So
different types of broth soups that you can enjoy. There's also a road dedicated just for chicken broth noodles.
Yes.
Takkanmari.
Yes.
So in each alleyway, you can see different iconic menus, and I think it'd be really nice. Like one day you can eat the chicken broth type of soup, another day you can eat beef broth soup. If you're a big foodie like myself, I would recommend for you to go to Namdaemun. But speaking of food, I would now like to introduce you guys to the best food markets in the capital, and that's Gwangjang Market. I personally love going to Gwangjang Market because it's more easy to eat finger food, I guess. It's a lot of street food. So the word Gwangjang means to gather from afar and stay together. If you take a look at the screen, this is how it looks like. There's just so many food vendors here and a lot of iconic menus like tteokbokki, spicy fried rice cakes. I love that. And it goes along with kimbap. It's called mayak kimbap. Mayak meaning drugs, meaning it's so addictive that you keep wanting to eat it. There's also odeng, mung bean pancakes, also known as bindaetteok. Bindaetteok is a very traditional style pancake here. You just grease it in with a lot of oil. It tastes amazing with makgeolli, Korean fermented wine. And there's so many types of Korean traditional street food here that I highly recommend it as a hot attraction to visit if you're a tourist in Seoul. It's open all year round, and it's just between Jongno Samga Station and Dongdaemun Station. So after visiting some of the Seoul's other iconic places, you can definitely go here to enjoy a full meal. Another market with great food is Mangwon. It's close to Mangnidan Street and Mappo Hangang Park, making it a great place to pick up some street food before you go for a riverside picnic. Now here the most iconic menu you must try is the deep fried and braised chicken. There's also braised pig's feet, and it's different from other traditional markets because it's literally located in the middle of a residential neighborhood. So you can see how other local Koreans live, and I think it gives off a more local vibe rather than a tourist vibe.
But it's also super young because Mangwon and Mangnidan is kind of known as the younger hip area as well. So there's kind of the new and the old merging together. It's a really cool spot to be in.
And I think I love food markets, especially here in Korea, because of the concept of cheong. There's no direct English translation for cheong, but I think it's the friendly atmosphere that these food markets give because the food street vendors ask for a sample. They're like, try this, try that. And even if you buy, for instance, a $10 worth of food, they add extra.
It's called service.
Service. Exactly.
Extra little something
that
in there.
extra little bite. And I think recently on different OTT platforms like Netflix, we've seen a lot of foreigners, especially international celebrities, visit these food markets. So definitely try it out. Walter, have you ever been to these food markets?
It was actually one of the very first places I came to as a tourist when I came back to Korea. And it was just an amazing place to be because, like you, I'm a foodie and I love my food. And so the fact that you can basically walk one step and it can be a completely different store, walk another step, it can be, you can do basically just eating all these different foods down just one street. And yes, my favorite as well was the, I guess they call it like a potato pancake, right? Yeah. But that was amazing. I could have eaten several of them, but they are deep fried in like this much oil, so it was. I had to control myself.
I feel like if you want to taste all the different types of food, at least in one of these markets, you should take at least a few days to revisit over and over and try different foods. But I mean, it can get kind of heavy because a lot of them are really greasy. So make sure you take a good walk around the neighborhood as well. It's so beautiful near there.
Also, it's just in the middle of the capital, so you can go to like a traditional palace, as we've introduced to you in previous episodes where we introduced the hottest places in Seoul during autumn. Another tip I'd like to give you as a local is because there's just so many street vendors, you might feel like which is the best one to go to.
Right.
But to be very honest with you guys, I don't know, but it tastes the same.
It all tastes good. They all taste good.
And you know what's really cool at the moment is that with the ones that we've introduced so far, they're all relatively within walking distance from each other. So if you go to Gwangjang Market, you can just go for a little walk down the Cheonggye Stream and go to Dongdaemun. I mean, it only takes like about 15 minutes or 20 minutes by walking. So you get full, you go for a walk, and then you go shopping. This is seriously all within walking distance.
And I think one more market that I'd like to introduce before we go on to yours is that nearby Gwangjang, there's also this place where you can buy different like stuff for knitting wear, like Gwangjang Market.
Yeah.
You might make little candles. I used to go there all the time to like buy little things to make scarves and stuff for the winter.
Oh, I didn't know you made scarves.
This is a little TMI, by the way. But I would do that, and then once I would get hungry, I would just walk by Gwangjang Market and get food. So there's so much to enjoy, and it all in walking distance. Now, Walter, would you like to take us through the last type of market we should go to?
I think we're going to go to two places where I think if you don't have a lot of money, though these places and markets have, you know, fairly cheap products, you know, there's always going to be a cheaper place and a cooler place to go to. And I'm going to introduce Dongmyo Market and Pungmul Market. Now, I'll start with Dongmyo Market because I used to live near there. I used to go there frequently. It's a flea market that sells used clothing and vintage clothing as well. So, you know, used clothing, you might not like it, but vintage clothing always looks cool.
It does.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, used clothing isn't bad anyway. It's not dirty, they cleaned it, whatever. But yes, these flea markets like sell a lot, as we can see here, a lot of old, I guess, trinkets as well as souvenirs that you could buy for your friends. If you're a tourist, for sure, this is a place to go for you to pick up that extra special present for your people back home. And since it's such a retro place, it means it's great for pictures. If you can take a good selfie here or like put up something for Instagram, this is the place to go to as well. And especially if you're into that vintage style, you could really recreate the old times because as you can see, it's not in a big mall, theatre or whatever. It's in these small shops and they have such unique qualities to them. And I definitely think this is the sort of market I would like to go to. But another one is Pungmul Market, which is also a flea market, like a very cheap market to go to. Now, this traditional market, you can check out some of the antiques, as we can see here. Look at some of those phones. I guarantee none of you know how to use those phones. I know how to use those phones. That's how old I am. But if you want to like jazz up your house a little bit, go look at some records. I know that records are coming back into fashion as well. So these are great places for those kind of people. And I know so many people who are interested in this sort of fashion now. Things that your grandparents would consider cool would go there. And now we consider cool is it's a great place to be.
Right, and towards the end of the VCR, we saw like interactive places you can enjoy. I think that's a booming thing among our generation as well. Yeah. Because we've never really experienced what it was like for our grandparents or parents' generation. But inside the Pungmul Market, you can see like old record shops, old record shops, or like they reenacted what it would look like if you went to school during their times.
Yeah, you kind of get to be in their shoes, experience that a little, and like we were saying, it's kind of back in fashion. So not only do you just kind of get a taste of it, you bring it back home. A lot of people collect LPs now. Right. It's a great spot to go. and I just kind of want to go back to the whole flea market thing. Nowadays, there's a lot of vintage stores in Korea where it's secondhand, but it's kind of the more expensive vintage shops. So it's sometimes more expensive than getting regular clothes in, I don't know, a shopping mall. But these places, the flea market, that is where you get true vintage and kind of the fun of thrifting, because you find things in the middle of this pile of clothes, and it's cheap and really it's cute. Yeah,
it's really cheap, and you can also negotiate the price as well. Like you could say they might ask for like $10 for one T-shirt, but then you know the Chong concept again. That's the thing about these markets. Like these vendors would give you 2 T-shirts for $10.
Here's 2 tips. 1, get a lot of things and then do the discount, and 2, have cash on you. That helps.
That really does help. So we've taken you through 3 different types of markets. 1 being traditional, like the most iconic ones, Namdaemun, Dongdaemun. Then we took you to the food markets where you can get really good traditional and street food. And the last one was really a snippet back in time. You can see what it was like in Korea 10, 20, 30 years down the road, and you can enjoy a lot of vintage and hip clothes. Now, we asked if any of our viewers had been to any of these types of markets in Korea, and if so, to share their experience with us. Take a look at the screen to find out what 3 of them had to share. Ramsey said, I traveled to Seoul, Busan, and Jeju last month, and I enjoyed the time I spent visiting the traditional market. It helps me immerse in Korean culture, and also it became a one-stop shop for all the food that I'm interested to try, ranging from yakgwa to marinated crabs. Jiao Wei-ki said Koreans should be able to bring their markets to other countries. In New Zealand, we have Wang Market that sells all kinds of stuff from Korea. Charles Chang says, it's great, but so many tourists. It's almost become a tourist attraction and not a local authentic market, but the food is amazing. So it's great to find out that our viewers who've actually visited Korea have gone to all these markets, and I completely agree. I think it'd be a great chance for Korea, with the Hallyu wave and K-food wave booming across the world, to send its markets abroad, especially as we mentioned in the news feed, we're seeing Kimchi Day potentially becoming a federal holiday in the United States as well. Now, as a final note, anything you guys would like to share to our viewers before they visit any of the places we've recommended today?
Oh man, I feel like because we're doing the series of where you should visit during autumn, if you guys are coming to Korea during autumn, really know what you want. There's so much to see, even just within Seoul. Of course, there's so much other things to see, like going to Gapyeong, maybe Busan, but if you're staying in Korea, really mark out your priorities. If it's food, definitely visit Gwangjang-sijang. If it's shopping, figure out what kind of shopping you want to do. And I feel like you will have a jam-packed week of food and fun and shopping.
Yes.
What about you, Walter?
Yeah, I agree with Nael, but I would also say that also go into these markets with an open mind. I think that, Gwangjang Market is a great place for you to try new food. And if you're really hesitant to try, let's say, raw sliced beef or anything like that, just push yourself. I think you'll be very pleasantly surprised, because it's now one of my favorite Korean dishes. Yes, for me, if I go to those vintage markets where there's clothes or antiques, I don't go in there with a specific view of like what I want to buy as I would in a department store. I go in there, and if it's something I like, I buy it. And to be honest with you, that's a much more enjoyable way to buy clothes, when you get surprised by what you see. So, and I'm sure if you go to those markets, you'll be very surprised.
And I think my tip for you, if you decide to rent a car, maybe not take your car towards these markets. Not good parking space there. Use the subway. And as we've mentioned before, Korea has one of the best public transportation methods in the world, so might as well. And as we mentioned before, it's all walking distance. So make sure to have a blast once you're in Korea during the autumn season, hopefully at these markets we've introduced to you. In the meantime, we'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks to Nal Song, no problem, and Walter Lee.
Lovely to be here.
All right, and thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you next week. We are News Generation.
Welcome. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? Welcome. 24시간 불이 꺼지지 않는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
한국에 오면 먹어야죠.